As the empire expanded its cable network, nations realized information didn't simply travel, it obeyed Britain completely. Messages that defined peace, panic, treaties, and trade moved first through British eyes before reaching intended destinations. Every second gained through telegraphy became a second of power shaping decisions across continents instantly. Britain didn't dominate through force. It dominated through timing so precise rivals couldn't comprehend its magnitude. Telegraph networks grew into arteries carrying intelligence, commerce, war strategy, and market behavior through copper veins. Engineers buried these arteries deep under deserts, oceans, jungles, and frozen landscapes untouched by civilization entirely. Wherever the empire stretched, cables followed, binding distant territories into London's orchestrated informational rhythm. The result was a global nervous system where London functioned as the unquestioned imperial brain. British operators became unseen diplomats, decoding messages that governments didn't want intercepted or interpreted incorrectly. They memorized patterns of communication, learning to anticipate crises long before newspapers reported unfolding events. Every disruption hinted at rebellion, invasion, economic panic, or diplomatic rupture somewhere within the empire. Thus, the telegraph network wasn't just communication infrastructure. It was Britain's early warning system for survival. Foreign governments tried masking sensitive signals, using ciphers and private codes guarded fiercely by intelligence services. But British technicians refined decryption methods that peeled secrecy layer by layer until meaning emerged clearly. This capability transformed London into the world's most informed political center, far surpassing foreign capitals. Knowledge became supremacy, empowering Britain to shape outcomes before rivals fully understood incoming danger. Financial speculators thrived because telegraph wires delivered market updates before competitors received basic confirmation. A few minutes of early knowledge meant fortunes created instantly, while others suffered catastrophic losses. This timing advantage ensured London remained global finance's gravitational center, regardless of political turbulence. The world didn't follow British markets voluntarily. Information speed forced them into alignment effortlessly. Shipping empires depended utterly on telegraph coordination to manage fleets across unpredictable oceans and imperial waters. Captains waited for London's coded instructions before adjusting routes, avoiding storms, or accelerating critical deliveries. A single telegraph correction often saved millions in cargo costs and prevented disastrous logistical failures. Britain became the conductor of maritime movement, guiding global trade like a hand manipulating tides. During wars, telegraph cables determined whether armies advanced, retreated, reinforced, or completely changed strategic theaters. Commanders relied on real-time information flowing faster than enemy reconnaissance or outdated courier systems. Britain's ability to coordinate distant battlefields transformed warfare into mathematical execution rather than chaotic improvisation. Victory belonged not to the strongest army, but to the fastest information pipeline, and Britain owned it. Rivals attempted sabotage, sending divers, rebels, and mercenaries to cut undersea cables during moments of crisis. But Britain protected its lines with naval patrols, decoy routes, and rapid repair ships stationed globally. Even when enemies severed cables, backups restored communication within hours, protecting Britain's strategic advantage. Sabotage failed because the empire prepared contingencies long before opponents understood the complexity involved. Telegraph clerks experienced immense psychological pressure, handling messages capable of reshaping entire continents instantly. One misinterpreted symbol could trigger diplomatic chaos or military retaliation with irreversible consequences. Stress became routine, yet clerks worked with disciplined precision, ensuring Britain's informational machinery never faltered. In their hands rested the confidence of nations, economies, corporations, and empires trusting British reliability. London newspapers gained unprecedented dominance because foreign outlets received information slower and less reliably. Stories that shaped global opinion first appeared in British print, influencing foreign populations unintentionally. Media became an extension of empire, crafting narratives that travelled as quickly as telegraph signals. Britain controlled not only information flow, but also interpretation, creating a powerful fusion of knowledge and persuasion. Colonial administrators relied on telegraph lines to maintain authority across territories spanning unmanageable distances. Rebellions weakened because London could intervene faster, sending reinforcements or negotiations within minutes. Telegraphs replaced slow hierarchical chains, turning British governance into a responsive, adaptive, high-speed structure. Power no longer depended on proximity, but on wires stretching like imperial nerve fibers across continents. Telegraph companies became some of history's most strategic corporations, commanding influence deeper than governments understood. They negotiated landing rights, exclusive access zones, and diplomatic privileges rivaling sovereign international agreements. These companies acted as empire builders, merging corporate ambition with British geopolitical interests seamlessly. Infrastructure and empire became indistinguishable, transforming communication into a corporate political hybrid organism. Nations that refused alignment with Britain struggled because every communication route passed through British-controlled links. Their trade slowed, diplomacy weakened, and military coordination suffered under unreliable non-British systems. Resistance proved costly, forcing them eventually to join the network despite political reluctance or ideological opposition. Thus, Britain gained obedience not through domination, but through the inevitability of global connectivity. Economists later claimed the telegraph allowed Britain to monetize time itself, the ultimate imperial currency. Faster knowledge meant fewer mistakes, more predictability, and greater stability for British-led commerce globally. While other nations gambled with delayed information, Britain acted on near real-time intelligence consistently. This advantage compounded over decades, ensuring British wealth grew even when territorial empire declined. Multi-continent corporations emerged, using telegraph networks to operate like unified machines, regardless of geography. Branch managers in India, Africa, and the Caribbean followed London's instructions with mechanical precision hourly. This coordination meant British companies outperformed rivals still trapped in slower, outdated communication loops. Thus, telegraphs globalized British business long before globalization became a recognized economic phenomenon. Telegraph lines even influenced culture, shrinking emotional distances between families separated by oceans and empires. Messages of births, deaths, and marriages traveled faster than ships, altering the psychology of separation. Empire became emotionally connected, forging sentimental threads that strengthened loyalty toward Britain involuntarily. Information shrank the world, and Britain decided the pace at which it shrank for everyone else. Governments feared Britain might weaponize information by delaying, rerouting, or prioritizing communications strategically. This fear became a quiet diplomatic pressure point, enabling Britain to negotiate from a superior position. No nation dared antagonize Britain when its telegraph operators controlled the pipelines of global certainty. Influence didn't require threats, only the potential for delayed information, which terrified world leaders. In the 20th century, telegraph lines evolved into undersea cables, forming the backbone of modern communication. Even as technology advanced, the geography of British influence remained eerily similar to Victorian networks. New systems used old routes, perpetuating Britain's strategic advantage through deep-rooted infrastructural legacy. The world changed technologically, but the architecture of control remained unmistakably British at its core. Modern markets still echo Britain's telegraphic design, relying on instant global communication to synchronize behavior. Stock exchanges move with the same logic Britain invented when cables first crossed oceans. Financial storms travel faster now, but the system's DNA descends directly from the imperial telegraph web. Thus, Britain's influence persists not through empire, but through blueprints embedded inside global communication design. Today's undersea internet cables follow paths laid by British telegraph engineers more than a century earlier. The most advanced digital networks still depend on routes originally shaped by imperial strategic priorities. Britain's past decisions guide 21st century data movement, proving how infrastructure outlives political power. Empires may fall, but systems remain, and Britain built the most enduring system of all. The telegraph empire didn't die. It transformed into the digital empire, powering modern civilization invisibly. Every message, transaction, algorithm, and communication owes something to Britain's pioneering underground vision. Wires became fibers, pulses became packets, and stations became data centers beneath global cities. But the blueprint, the logic of power through communication, remains exactly the same today. Britain changed the world by proving control never required land, armies, or visible authority. It required owning the pathways through which information traveled, decisions formed, and futures materialized. That revelation reshaped geopolitics permanently, writing a new rule for global dominance silently. Whoever controls communication doesn't follow history, they write it before anyone else reacts. If this story changed how you see wires shaping global power, remember, empires survive longest when they control information. Subscribe for more hidden truths buried beneath modern systems. Because the next message may already be traveling through history's cables. Before armies crossed oceans or markets decided destinies, Britain discovered a force far stronger than steel. It realized information traveled faster than ships, treaties, or armies marching under imperial banners abroad. If Britain controlled information, it would control decisions before rivals even understood their consequences clearly. Thus began a quiet revolution where wires, not warships, shaped the 19th century's entire global balance. The world still depended on letters carried across oceans, delayed by storms, pirates, and unpredictable fate. Nations waited weeks for diplomatic replies, leaving governments vulnerable to chances carved by weather. But Britain saw delay as weakness, and weakness as opportunity, crafting a system to eliminate uncertainty. Telegraph cables became Britain's new empire, invisible, silent, and unstoppable in its strategic precision. London's merchants understood instantly that whoever mastered communication would dominate international trade flows effortlessly. A message transmitted in seconds could decide prices, redirect shipments, or trigger industrial booms worldwide. So the City of London pushed engineers to create networks stretching deeper than imperial ambitions reached. The empire's future wouldn't be written in iron or gunpowder, but in electric pulses crossing continents. British engineers surveyed vast oceans, planning routes more ambitious than any naval expedition attempted previously. They mapped underwater valleys, volcanic ridges, and unpredictable seabeds, requiring extraordinary scientific understanding. The Atlantic cable became their crown jewel, connecting Britain to America through a single electrical heartbeat. Once completed, Britain gained something priceless, the ability to speak faster than any rival nation. Telegraph stations arose across the empire, glowing like constellations, forming an imperial network of power. Operators transmitted coded messages transforming commerce, diplomacy, warfare, and financial speculation entirely. Each station became a node, feeding global information into Britain's central intelligence core. Britain no longer followed events. It anticipated them before anyone else sensed approaching change. Governments relied on telegraph cables to stabilize internal crises before public panic consumed their fragile administrations. A single warning from London could determine whether a rebellion collapsed or ignited uncontrollably. Telegraphs provided real-time intelligence that turned colonial officials into strategic masters of their territories. Thus, Britain shaped foreign realities not through force, but through communication arriving faster than danger. Merchants used telegraph updates to manipulate markets, outpacing rivals still trapped in slower communication cycles. Copper shipments, grain prices, and currency values all shifted according to information London received first. The city's financial might grew because its reaction time became the fastest on Earth. A world powered by metal and money now bowed to the empire, controlling its information flow. Nations watched nervously as Britain extended cables into regions considered strategically indispensable for independence. Every mile of copper wire buried underground or sunk beneath oceans strengthened Britain's global position. France protested the expansion, America hesitated, and Germany feared economic vulnerability through British communication supremacy. But Britain pushed forward relentlessly, confident speed alone would guarantee imperial longevity beyond territorial borders. Military generals benefited enormously, receiving intelligence from distant theatres within moments instead of months. Troops moved faster, supply routes changed immediately, and strategies evolved quicker than enemy forces expected. Britain mastered global warfare not by overwhelming numbers, but by unmatched awareness of battlefield conditions. Faster information meant fewer mistakes, and fewer mistakes meant victories regardless of numerical disadvantage. Telegraph clerks, often unnoticed by societies above, became guardians of secrets shaping continents silently. They received messages containing military orders, commercial deals, diplomatic threats, and intelligence updates. One mismanaged transmission could alter the trajectory of political crises or international negotiations dramatically. Thus, ordinary office rooms became invisible war rooms, determining the fate of empires daily. London transformed into the world's information capital, receiving updates from every ocean within seconds. No city possessed such concentrated global awareness, turning London into humanity's unofficial communication brain. Politicians depended on these cables to anticipate conflicts, manage diplomacy, and stabilize vulnerable economies. Britain's power grew not through expansion, but through becoming indispensable to global decision-making. The empire built redundancy routes, ensuring information remained uninterrupted even during storms or sabotage attempts. Secondary cables, hidden paths, and fortified relay stations created a communication fortress no rival matched. Even if one corridor failed, 3 more ensured Britain never experienced strategic blindness. Information outages cripple other nations. For Britain, they were mere temporary inconveniences. Foreign governments worried British operators might intercept sensitive communications transmitted through imperial cables. Their fears weren't unfounded. The network allowed Britain to gather intelligence discreetly and continuously. Every message, civilian or governmental, passed through British eyes before reaching its final destination. Britain learned not only about events, but about intentions long before they materialized into action. Banks relied on telegraph signals to adjust interest rates, approve loans, or halt capital flight instantly. Britain's financial dominance grew because decisions occurred minutes after news arrived globally. Investors trusted markets stabilized by communication speed unmatched anywhere beyond London's telegraph rooms. Thus the telegraph became a financial weapon, securing London's superiority through perfect information cycles. Manufacturers coordinated production schedules, using near-instant updates on raw material movements worldwide. A factory in Manchester could accelerate output minutes after receiving a message from Bombay. Such synchronization turned Britain into the most efficient industrial ecosystem on Earth. Telegraphs eliminated uncertainty, enabling the empire to operate like a perfectly engineered machine. Rivals attempted constructing their own global cable networks, but failed due to Britain's overwhelming head start. By the time they connected regions, Britain already controlled landing stations everywhere strategically important. Nations had to negotiate with Britain simply to send messages across oceans. Thus telegraph dominance granted Britain global rent, profit earned merely for facilitating communication. Even newspapers became instruments of power, receiving breaking information long before foreign competitors reacted. British editors shaped narratives faster, influencing opinions across colonial and European populations simultaneously. This narrative advantage became a diplomatic weapon, shaping international perception in Britain's favour. Controlling headlines meant controlling emotion, and controlling emotion meant controlling public momentum. Telegraph wires buried underground symbolized Britain's shift from traditional imperialism to infrastructural dominance. Instead of forcefully capturing land, Britain captured the invisible routes through which knowledge travelled. Control of information meant control of progress, fear, diplomacy, war, commerce, and global imagination. Thus, Britain built a network so essential that no nation dared function without it. Economic historians later argued that telegraphy allowed Britain to globalize its financial reach effortlessly. Stock exchanges in London, New York, Hong Kong, and Bombay cinched values through instantaneous message transfers. This synchronization made Britain the center of global finance, fusing markets into a British-timed rhythm. Even today's digital markets trace their foundations to the empire's telegraphic heartbeat. Yet beneath the surface, nations feared that Britain's control over communication made them perpetually vulnerable. They worried Britain could delay messages, manipulate interpretations, or prioritize its own strategic advantages. Information was no longer neutral. It became a tool wielded by the empire controlling its circulation, and that tool shaped the modern world more deeply than any colonial conquest recorded in history. As the 19th century closed, Britain's telegraph empire stretched across oceans, deserts, jungles, and empires. It linked continents into a single British-timed pulse, guiding global behavior like a conductor commanding orchestras. No nation had ever possessed such invisible power, ruling minds, markets, and militaries through pure information flow. And the world didn't yet realize the full depth of reliance forming beneath its feet.